Holla, what's up?
What's up, Anthony Hamilton? My celebrity life. GeHolla.
Shout out to Ge Holla, reaching 1 million listeners on his podcast, My Celebrity Life, resetting the bar.
What's up, Ge Holla? This your boy Genuine. Shout out to you.
Y'all, this Master P, and shout out to Ge Holla of My Celebrity Life, the show.
Ge Holla, check this. I know we didn't get to speak at the spot that we was at together, but look, man, keep going, keep doing your thing.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor, it's my pleasure, it's my esteemed pleasure to introduce to you a wonderful human being in the planet, a wonderful soul that's in this universe, and just an all-around fantastic woman. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show. It is the Madame Helen Blocker Adams.
Ge Holla. Oh my goodness, what an introduction. Oh, that was amazing. Hello, so good to see you. You know, it's funny when people ask me that question. I always have to hesitate because I'm a military brat. And so my parents were born and raised in Hepzibah, Georgia. Okay, but I was born in Hampton, Virginia. But I don't call that home because I was only there for, let's say, 3 years, 3.5 years. And then we left there and moved to Germany. And then we lived in Okinawa, Japan. We lived in Brindisi, Italy. We traveled all over the world. But when my dad retired in April of 1975, he said, okay, it's time to go home. So this is home. You know, this is where my roots are, Augusta, Georgia. Yeah, Langley. I was born at Langley Air Force Base, the hospital there. Yeah, because that's where my dad was stationed, at Langley Air Force Base. We lived in Brindisi, Italy for 3.5, 4 years. And I remember living when my dad was first stationed there. We had to live off base for a little while, and because they didn't have quarters ready on the military base. And so we lived off base with the Italians, okay? And we lived in this area where we lived upstairs, and then the landlord was downstairs, and there was a lot of sheep around. And so every morning, you know, we would smell sheep. But the thing that we really loved, that really resonates with me, G, is every morning the landlord would make homemade bread. Okay, you know, they did do that a lot in Italy. Homemade bread that would just smell through the whole building where we lived. And so we got a chance to eat fresh Italian bread, you know, every morning. And so that I remember when we lived in Brindisi, Italy. And I was like 6, 7, and 8 years old. Now, the last place that my dad was stationed was San Antonio, Texas. So we lived in San Antonio for 3 years. My dad retired in April of 75. And when we moved to Augusta, Georgia, okay, there was 6 weeks left in my 10th grade year and I went to Glen Hills, okay? Now, in my homeroom class, I remember specifically being asked, did I ride horses to school? And they were serious. And we met people that had never been on an airplane before. Now, keep in mind, military brats, we're on an airplane every 2 to 5 years. So I just couldn't even imagine. You never been on an airplane, but they thought we rode horses to school because we lived in Texas. That's real. People do have a tendency to channel their knowledge to what they see. And of course, they're used to Bonanza and Wild Wild West, all of those type of shows that were very popular back in the day. And that just kind of blew my mind when they asked me that. And, you know, and the person was serious. And so, you know, I try not to look at him like he was an idiot, but that was in Glen Hills High School in 1975, G. Oh my gosh. So that was a couple of memorable moments. And, we lived in Okinawa, Japan for 5 years. And one thing that was very memorable for me, and when I think about me as a person who's uh, overcome a lot of obstacles and just have just persevered, God has just been with me, even though sometimes I haven't always acknowledged him in that way, because sometimes we go astray, and I did for a minute in around the 2014. But I do remember there was one time in Okinawa, Japan. I was a Girl Scout. So the Girl Scout, we got a chance to go on an excursion to an island off the island of Okinawa. And it was supposed to be just a day trip, supposed to leave that morning, supposed to come back that evening. Well, there was a bad storm. And when there were storms in Okinawa, tornadoes and typhoons and all of that, we were stranded. We were stranded in that island because we had to go across, on a boat. So we couldn't come back. So the soldiers came and brought us the sea rations and all of that, and they brought us blankets, and we ended up staying in it was an abandoned school. So we were in the gym, and we were all laid. So it was probably about, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 young girls, okay? And I was about 9, 10 years old at the time. But the next morning when they came to get us, they came in a helicopter, and I was the very first person to get on the helicopter, and I was my mother still has the picture to this day in the newspaper, these stranded Girl Scouts, coming back on a helicopter, and I was the first one to step out of the helicopter. Isn't that cool? So that's something that I remember, when we were living in Okinawa, Japan. Great memories. That's right. That's exactly right. and I got the newspaper clipping to prove it. For me, it was more a matter of seeing more Black people in large numbers of people at one time. Because living overseas, you got military bases, so it's very diverse. On military bases, we're small, we're a very close knit. There was in every military base, there was, one skating rink, one bowling alley, one movie theater, and everybody kind of knew everybody. So when we moved and got settled in Augusta, Georgia, going to Glen Hills. Now, at that time, Glen Hills was very diverse. I mean, it was probably 50-50 in terms of white and Black. Okay, well, now it's, 100% Black. So that was a culture, I guess a culture shock, if you will. Not that it was anything that we couldn't deal with, because we learned how to, work with and operate with different groups of people. So that was different. And then the other thing is, living on military bases, you didn't have things like amusement parks and screen machines and lots of fast food restaurants. So and because see, we lived in San Antonio in terms of stateside, and we also lived in Key West, Florida, but I was much younger. Okay, because my brother and sister were born in Key West, Florida. So my formative years, we didn't live in places where there was, McDonald's in every corner and that sort of thing. So when we moved to San Antonio, there was a Jack in the Box. And we were like, what in the world is a Jack in the Box, And so that's when we got our first experience of eating, fast food on a regular. Now, be mindful that in between a lot of the travel, we would come, to Augusta and visit family, but it would be for like, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So it wasn't like we had a whole lot of time to do a lot of things. It was mainly, spending time with family. And then we were back on a plane going somewhere else. 16 years old when we moved and settled here in Augusta. That's one thing that I think makes me unique, is that when you're having to travel every 2 to 5 years, you learn how to make friends quickly. You learn how to adapt, make a new friend, and accept people as they are, and just make friends. So, no, it wasn't. Now, I can tell you that coming to uh, Augusta and Glen Hills, and you got to, Glen Hills is a feeder school. So you got the middle school, and then you got, Glen Hills Middle, you got Glen Hills Elementary. So all of the people that I got a chance to know and get to know, they all knew each other and have known each other since, they were in elementary school. So I was always an outsider, okay? And that was okay because I was used to being an outsider, moving to different places. But I learned how to make friends. And then I was only there the last 6 weeks of my 10th grade year, and then all of my 11th and 12th. And then I went off to college, went to Atlanta to Georgia State University, and then made new friends all over again. Now, check this out. I chose to go to Georgia State University because most of my other friends were going to other colleges. I mean, we're going to other colleges. So what I wanted to do was go to a college that the same people that I went to high school with weren't at that particular college, so that I could start all over and meet new friends and, that kind of thing. So that's just me. I've always liked to explore, do things a little different, kind of go off the path a little differently than most. But the funny thing is that a lot of the same people who originally started going in their freshman and sophomore year to other colleges, they ended up graduating from Georgia State University. They ended up matriculating there. Yeah.
How did you like Atlanta when you got there? No, those
I loved it. It was very overwhelming. My parents, it was to their dismay that I chose to go to Atlanta to go to college and Georgia State University, and they didn't have a dorm at the time. So I had to live in an apartment. Now, keep in mind, being a military brat, you're very sheltered. I mean, you're living on these small military bases. Everybody knows everybody. There's no big skyscrapers, definitely no I-20 and I-285. And so that was, but once again, the adventurer in me, go back to the trip, being stranded in, in Okinawa, Japan. It was a little different, but I got used to it quickly. When I first moved there, I used the bus system. I didn't have a car when I first got there because I wanted to kind of figure out my way first. And but two things that happened to me in my freshman year, and keep in mind, Georgia State University, I mean, it's a huge institution now, but it was huge in 1977 also. Okay. The average class size was, at least 100 students. And for some people, that's real intimidating, but, I managed very well. I graduated in the 4 years, that I was supposed to graduate, started 77 and graduated in December of 1981. But Atlanta was, I was so naive, G, I mean, just, I was just in awe of the bigness of the place, compared to, how I grew up and where I grew up. Yeah, but Atlanta is Atlanta. And I would, now in 2026, I wouldn't want to live there, at least not maybe in the outskirts. I mean, because the traffic is ridiculous. I travel, I go there a lot, on business, and I have family there, but the traffic is just It's just ridiculous. I got married shortly after I graduated from college. I got married in May of 1982, and then stayed married about 3 years. And I wanted to not be married anymore. Dumb mistake, because he was the nicest guy in the world. But I was young and didn't get a chance to really explore my career area. And so I did move back to Augusta and worked. At that time, I worked for the Walker Group for a little while. They had a newspaper. So I worked and wrote for the newspaper and dabbled in some, little bit of TV, and just had a good experience in being in the Atlanta area from that standpoint. So yeah, it was a good experience. Good experience.
When you say dabbled in TV, can you break that down? Were you like on
Well,
TV?
here's what I did. Okay, so my degree at Georgia State University was journalism with emphasis in broadcast media. Okay, and so in high school and in college, all I wanted to be a newscaster. That was my desire, to be a newscaster. But I had an experience when I did several student interns when I was at Georgia State. And actually, I had an opportunity to have an intern with Zernona Clayton, the Zernona Clayton. And I worked under her tutelage for, I guess, maybe a semester or two. But I had an opportunity one time, G, to actually go to a location and have the microphone in someone's, face, and I was asking whatever question, and it was very uncomfortable to me. Okay, and I can't even remember what it was, but I just remember saying, you know what? When even now when I watch the news and there's just been a tragedy and the person here, well, how do you feel right now? Well, doggone it, how do you think I feel? you know and so in my mind I was like, nah, that's not what I want to do. So what I did do was I started a public affairs television show that aired on the Channel 12 network, and it was called Bridging the Gap. I mean, I had producers, I had camera people, I scripted it out, and I would interview people, different things that was going on in the community, and it was called Bridging the Gap. So I even won an award for that. It was like, this was in, oh gosh, like 1992. I received the Cindy Pleasance Media Award from Channel 12 for that. And I did that for about a year. So that was my dabbling in the TV arena. And then, of course, I did talk radio for several years. That's right. I was at WKZK. But prior to that, I was with another talk radio station, and it was a small independent station. And I got a chance to have, I think I called it the Helen Blocker Adams show, and it was 2 hours, like from 12 to 2, something like that. But I love to talk, as you can tell. So it just was really good for me. And then I remember my English teacher at Glen Hill. She had told me at that time that, I ought to pursue journalism because I was, a decent writer in 12th grade. I do know that people say I have the voice. So even if someone is around me and they haven't seen me in a long time, G, they'll hear my voice and say, "Wait a minute, I hear a familiar voice. That sounds like Helen Blocker Adams." And so, yeah, that's me. And what's so interesting about that question is that my minor was political science at Georgia State. Now, I only chose that because it was intriguing to me, but I wasn't thinking, oh, one day I'm going to run for a political office. No, it was fast forward to probably 2003, 2004, 2002 timeframe. that was when I was very entrenched in the South Augusta area when it comes to community and small business and economic development. And, if anybody can make things happen, on a shoestring budget, it was Helen Blocker Adams, Helen Blocker Adams, okay? And bringing diverse groups of people together to make things happen. That's what I've always been known for. So one day, and this was in 2004, somebody said, "You know what, Helen? You ought to run for mayor." It was around the time that the current mayor at that time, their second 4-year term was over, so it was like open for anybody to run. And I had never thought about it, never even considered it, but it sounded appealing. He had a very good, I can't even remember who it was, but it was a fellow small business friend that attended a lot of my functions and meetings and saw how I was able to, any meeting that I put together, it was always diverse, whether it was white, black, Hispanic, different career areas, different industries, professionals, and bringing them together. And that's what I did. I did that well. And then I remember going home and talking to my family about it, and they were like, well, yeah, let's do it. So 2005, I ran for mayor. Combination of things. First of all, the energy, the people that were supporting me, the fun of meeting new people and knocking on doors and asking for the votes and all of that. Now, once again, just like when we moved to Augusta in 1975, remember I was talking about how naive I was? Well, I was even more naive when it came to politics, because one of the things that drastically changed was Helen was the darling, okay? Everybody loved Helen, all the politicians. It didn't matter what political party. And at that point, I never even had any conversation about political parties or anything like that. I was Helen, involved with the community, small business person. That was who I was. Now, I always voted, but that was never a part of my conversations. So once I announced my intention to run, then people started asking, well, where do you stand on this? And where do you stand on that? And I'm like, okay. Now, keeping in mind that mayor's race is nonpartisan, so it really shouldn't have mattered but people, here, I guess everywhere, but all I know is here in Augusta, it's like you gotta either be one way or another way, or if you're independent, like I consider myself an independent minded. Keep in mind now my background, my years growing up, I couldn't help but be an independent. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't grow up one way or the other. It was diverse. It's diverse. And so that was the I guess the negative part, if you will, G, because people started drawing the line, saying, oh, now this wonderful Helen that everybody loved and adored prior to that, I run for political office, and it was like, okay, she's hands off. And then that's the way it's been pretty much since then. So, but what I have learned though, those who are for me are for me. And they were for me before I ran and for me after I ran. And so that was the biggest, like, wow. So politics is interesting, but there's so many people that I met along the way, so many friends that I made over the years that I would have never met if I didn't run for political office. And then some people say, well, why are you running for mayor? Why didn't you start off, county commission or school board and work your way up? It's not your turn yet. Yeah, 2014. Yeah, that was the heartbreaker. That was I guess the 2014 was once again another opportunity for me to put my hat in the ring. It was four of us in the race, and it was, I had a great diverse team working with me, and we had a lot of energy. And now at the same time, I'm, struggling. I guess struggling entrepreneur that had some financial issues that were that some were resolved, some of them not resolved, some of them from a previous marriage, but nevertheless, still tied into me. And just so the race became it became very negative, very explosive, for lack of a better word, and to the point where less than 2 weeks before the election, I was front page headline news when it comes to, Helen and her finances. So I was, front page news, top of the fold in the newspaper. It was, let's see, it was, so the negative publicity, obviously it was a targeted situation. Okay, hey, we got to bring this girl down. I don't know who, but we were running a pretty good race. Okay, and so to have that, I was sucker punched. I always tell people it was like getting hit in the stomach and you can't breathe. And it was just several days before the election, so there was not enough time for me to share my side of the story, because there's always two sides of the story. And some people say there's always three sides to the story, their side, my side, and then the truth. And it would have been my side and the truth. But the fact of the matter is, that blew up in my face. And so I ended up getting out of the race. Now, my name was still on the ballot because it was just a week before the election. But I officially withdrew, which means if anybody did vote for me, and there's people that told me that they did, it didn't count. And then, obviously someone else won the race. And the reason the reason I ended up getting out of the race is because the negative publicity, just the hate that was out there was just so unbearable, and it affected my family, my parents, and it just wasn't worth it. I went from hey, Helen Blocker Adams, to folks Facebook unfriending me. I mean, like popcorn, like ping, 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 ping. And nobody, except my core people who knew me, knew that, hey, she's not the devil. She didn't kill somebody. She didn't commit fraud. She had some unpaid bills, in a nutshell. But it was just the amount of it and how it looked and how it was put out there in the media. And it was horrible. It was a very dark, that was the darkest time of my life. It really was. It really was. And it hurt like heck. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was a time now, and this was 2014. So we're talking 12 years ago. So I can talk about it, without getting emotional, but it took years before I can really be able to talk this intimately about that, because it was, it was hurtful, it was hurtful because it was deliberate, and I know, oh yeah, well, politics is, can be rough and tough and all of that. Yes, that is true. But it was a deliberate attempt to take Helen down. Oh my goodness. So I've written 4 books, but my latest one was written in 2022, and the name of it is Unusual Determination: Helen's Breast Cancer Journey to Victory. So in April of 2021, I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. and I had to go through the chemotherapy, the radiation, lost my hair, went through the whole dark moments, and I journaled the whole experience. And so what I did after, I got better and no more cancer, I do have to go in every 6 months and just, do the tests and the blood tests and all that. And everything's good. And so, yeah, I wrote a book, and the book is called Unusual Determination. You can get it on Amazon, or really, I think any bookstore they can order it, but definitely Amazon. And then, of course, for anybody that's in the Augusta area, they can grab me and get a autograph copy, because I have some copies myself. Yeah, but that was and that's journaling is something that I've been doing for a long time. I'm old school. Some people like, now when I'm in certain places, I do pull up my phone and type in the notes. But I like my good old legal pad, my yellow legal pad, and I have tons of them. I don't throw any of them away. I mean, I can show you tons of them, and so that's what I did. And then I have a bunch of journals. So that whole experience, I journaled. So my book, it's in first person and third person, because there are several areas of the book where it's exactly what I wrote in my journal. And it's not a long read, but it's very inspiring. It's designed to give hope, and it doesn't matter if a person has been diagnosed with cancer or breast cancer, but anybody that's gone through anything, that book will. It's very transparent. It has some very uh, uh, pictures that will make a person say, "Whoa," because like during my experience, I lost all my hair. And so most people didn't, most people, even family, because I wore hats all the time. I didn't do the wigs because wigs just didn't agree with me too high, even though there was one wig that I did wear one time to church. But for the most part, I wore my beanies and my caps. And so a lot of people didn't ever see it, completely bald until there's a picture in the book. And so they're like, "Wow, Helen, you did lose all your hair." I said, "Yeah, I sure did." Yeah, yeah. But it's a book of hope, and it's one of my best works, I think. Yeah, but to reach and talk to the people and make an impact, and you can't do that just sitting at home and not. If you're writing a book, people read the book. Now there's people that can read the book and get inspired. People can watch a public affairs TV show and be inspired. People can listen to a talk radio show and be inspired. Some of my words, and whether it's me and a guest. And so the podcast was just kind of a natural progression, if you will, since, podcasting is so much similar to radio, except it's simpler and you have more control, because you don't have to worry about, being in a studio from 6 to 9 or whatever. So the podcast is, it's Reset to Reinvent podcast. That's the name of it. And I'm on just every major podcast platform, including a YouTube channel, Reset to Reinvent YouTube channel. And the book, my podcast is primarily for women, but I have a lot of men listeners that's gone through something, gone through life, and need actionable strategies to get them from point A to point B, and helping them get through challenging life's experiences. So all of my episodes, whether I'm talking solo, and I do a lot of solo shows, I will talk about, a particular topic. But then when I have guests, my guests that come on have gone through some stuff. And then we're able to talk about how they've gone through, point A and point B. And it's a I'm on this episode, the podcast is usually about 40 to 50 minutes. Okay. It's weekly. It drops every Monday morning around 8:30 on all of the podcast platforms. And this coming Monday will be episode 49, G.
Hmm.
49 weeks in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I love it. I love it. I love it. I love just like the way we're talking. You know, I always tell people we're just having a conversation. Oh my goodness. So, you know, it's so funny. I'm in the podcast space, but it really wasn't until maybe 3 to 4 years ago that I even knew a whole lot about podcasting per se. And I certainly had never heard of this gentleman named David Shands until my producer and friend shared him. And I did a little bit of research. And then 3 years ago, well, let's see, this is 26. In 2024, we went to the podcast summit in Atlanta. And you want to talk about a room full of, it was over 1,000 people. And most of them looked like us, people of color and professionals. Just the energy, the vibe was like nothing that I had ever experienced before. And at that time, I didn't have a podcast, had been thinking about a name, but we knew that by the time we, left there, oh yeah, we had created a logo. I had finalized the name of the podcast. And when we left there after 2.5 days, it was on and popping. Now this was in July of 2024. And so it was March of 2025 that I actually launched the first episode of Reset to Reinvent. Yeah. But David Shands became my mentor / coach through several coaching programs that I'm on with him. And I got an opportunity because one of the things that we're already scheduled to go to the Podcast Summit 2026 in Atlanta, which is going to be in July, around the week of 4th of July. And there was one day, it was one night that he put out there, he was on Instagram and he said, I'm looking for some people who want to host a podcast summit tour. And he went on to say how he did that in 2024. He didn't do it in 2025, but he wanted to resume it in 2026. And he says, I'm not looking for someone who says that they're an influencer. He said, I want someone who's got some juice, who can make some things happen, who can put 100 people in a room without me having to promote. And I was like, so then he says, comment below, and I commented below, and then I filled out the form. And the next day he called me.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, based on the information that I filled out, and I knew, based on the criteria, what he was looking for, I was like, yeah, we can make this happen. And so we are the host city, Augusta. And what's so cool is that we're the only one. Let's see, there's some that's like further on the East Coast, Chicago, and there's one in Miami, and there's some other cities, Birmingham, but between Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, we're it. He's never been to Augusta before. Shands has never been to Augusta. So this is going to be his first time coming to Augusta, and we're having on April 23rd at 6 p.m. It's a free event where he's going to come and he's going to pour into people just like he does at the full podcast summit, everything about why to become a podcaster, what to do, how to do it. And we're going to network and have a good time in this April 23rd, 6 p.m. at the Kroc Center on Broad on Broad Street. I'm really, really excited to host this. And that's what's so exciting is that, and what's so funny is that, just like I was 3 years ago, I didn't know who a David Shands was. Okay. So here I am wanting to start a podcast and I'd never heard of David Shands. It was like, that just doesn't even make any sense. Now that I know him and in the space that he's in, that he dominates in, but at the same time, there are a lot of people that's never heard of David Shands. Okay. But once they, look him up and, look at social proof and sleep is for suckers is where he first got started in terms of the podcasting space. But he is a master at the craft of podcasting. And so for him to be able to come and be up close and personal for this free event, we do have some VIP tickets. That's a limited number that's available for people who want to join us for a luncheon and meet and see him up close and personal. Then they can do that as well. But for people who's like, what, hey, don't have $100 to do that. Let me just come to the free event. That's what we want. We want them to come, whether they're a podcaster thinking about a podcast, or if they're an entrepreneur or a content creator, it doesn't even matter, because getting in the room with all of these 100+ professionals, anybody who's anybody is going to be there. So my thing is, be there or be square. I know that's an old folks term, but that's real talk. And we are going to have fun because, he is one of the nicest, hardworking, real, authentic individuals that I've ever met. He's a family man, he's a husband. He talks about his children a lot. He has his children in a lot of his content. So you can just tell, he's just a good dude, And I think when people get a chance to meet him and see him on stage here in Augusta, Georgia, okay, it's going to blow their mind. And that's what I want. I want people to be like, wow, Helen, I didn't know what to expect, but thank you for hosting this event.